Welcome to The Outlet, an OTG production.
NBA fans, welcome to another edition of The Outlet. With me, as always, Parth.
What's up, Nick?
Doing well, Parth. Getting into these rankings, we're pretty far along. Today, we have number 14, the Toronto Raptors. Before we talk about the Raptors, here's a clip from last season.
Tied at 93, 10 seconds. 9 on the shot clock. Amir sets a screen. DeRozan behind the back. Momentarily lost it, gathers, shot, makes it! 95-93.
You mean DeRozan hits a game winner against Washington? Where was this in the playoffs?
Exactly my thought. Where was this in the playoffs? They needed clutch plays, and they did not get them.
They got, I think they got swept against the Wizards. It wasn't even a close series, which was sad because I really enjoy watching Toronto, especially in the playoffs, just because their atmosphere at the games are insane, and especially outside in Jurassic Park. I really enjoy just seeing that on TV.
Yeah, the Toronto fans get crazy. Definitely a disappointing season last year. They weren't able to compete with the Wizards in the playoffs. I thought personally that they'd at least push that series to 6 or 7 games, but that did not happen.
Right, and they had a really good regular season too. They started out really hot and then kind of stumbled, and ended up getting swept in the playoffs. So great start, terrible ending.
Consistency is a problem for this team. So do you think this is a fair ranking for the Raptors?
I do think it's a fair ranking. This makes them what, maybe 5th or 6th or 7th in our Eastern, just in the East.
7th or 6th, I think.
Right, yeah. So I think that's a fair place to start, but I definitely think they're going to be a good team this season.
I think they potentially could get higher, but consistency, like I said, is a problem for this team. Lowry and DeRozan, they need to play well for the whole season. They need all-star caliber seasons from them, but they want to get higher in the standings.
Right. I think they'll get that out of them, and I think this ranking will end up being an okay one. I think they'll be a lot better than the 14th best team in the league, but that remains to be seen. So as of right now, it's a good ranking.
Yeah, I think they have a lot to prove. Key returners. Who do you like to have a big season? I know we have DeRozan coming back, Lowry. Valanciunas just signed that big contract. Patrick Patterson will likely be starting. Who do you think needs to have a big year?
I think Terrence Ross needs to have a huge season. With the addition of DeMarre Carroll, that probably puts Terrence Ross as the 6th man coming off the bench. And we'll get into this later, but he's replacing the 6th man of the year. And so it's basically a contract year for him. I don't think he's getting an extension. I don't think he's getting an extension this season. So next offseason, he'll either be signing a qualifying offer or getting a restricted offer, an offer sheet somewhere else. So I think this is a huge season for him personally. And then he also needs to play well for this Raptors team to do well.
Yeah, big year for Terrence Ross. They need him to step up. They got DeMarre Carroll. That should say something to him. Like you said, he needs to fill Lou Williams' shoes, and he needs to score off the bench. Potentially could see a good amount of minutes, especially if the Raptors decide to play a little bit of small ball, maybe put Carroll at the 4. I know that's been mentioned at some point. But Terrence Ross had that 50-point game a few years ago. He's an explosive athlete. He needs to put it all together. What other guy do you think needs to step up for the Raptors?
In as far as their key returners?
Yes.
Well, of course, Valanciunas has to play up to his contract now. I think he got a pretty good deal. I was expecting him to get a lot more, but I think he signed a fair deal, and I think eventually this team will go as far as Valanciunas will. I don't want to say take them, but his potential, if he can reach it, will really set this team to the next level, to possibly elite contention in the East.
Yeah, he definitely needs to have a big season. Like you said, they did get him for a good deal, especially with the cap going up. So that should help the Raptors in the future. But they also are investing in him because they think that he can really take his game to the next level, both offensively and defensively. But let's talk about offseason moves. The Raptors got rid of a few players. They added a few players, especially DeMarre Carroll, Biyombo, Luis Scola, hometown boy Corey Joseph. What moves do you like?
Well, this team was one of the worst on defense last season, and you can really see that was a concerted effort to improve that with the additions of Carroll, Biyombo, Joseph, and Norman Powell, who they got in the draft. I'm not sure if DeLon Wright. Well, I do think DeLon Wright's a good defender. I think he was their first-round pick this past season.
Correct.
But as far as moves I really like, I do like bringing in DeMarre Carroll. It'll be interesting to see if he can replicate or reproduce his successes from Atlanta, just because this offense is a little bit different. I mean, the Raptors did have a really good offense last season. They were top 5 in offensive rating, but it's a little bit different from Atlanta's pace and space and ball movement and Spurs East sort of offense. So I don't know if he'll be able to have the same sort of impact, but defensively, the Junkyard Dog is going to show up.
And he gives them that toughness and physical presence at the wing position, something they probably need. He's going to play hard every night, give them some consistency at the small forward spot. I think that's what they need, especially with Terrence Ross not playing up the standards the last few seasons. I also like Bismack Biyombo. I don't think it was a crazy contract he got. It adds some defense for their bench, especially for a team that probably can improve defensively.
I think they got him for scraps just because Charlotte didn't even give him a qualifying offer and made him a restricted free agent. It's scary when the team that you've been with for like the last 3-4 years just wants you to leave. But I mean, they got him for scraps, so it's a great deal. I think the additions of Corey Joseph, DeLon Wright, and Norman Powell will end up being pretty big, just because Kyle Lowry, who I'm a big fan of and who looks awesome this offseason. If you haven't seen a picture of him, I'm sure we can throw it on there. But he looks to be in really, really good shape, probably the best shape of his career. So I think he'll have a big season. But he's had injury concerns the last couple of seasons, and so having defensive-minded Corey Joseph, Norman Powell, DeLon Wright in the backcourt will improve their defense as well as give the Raptors insurance at the point guard position.
Yeah, Corey Joseph's got to be pretty happy. He comes from Toronto, and then Drake shouts him out in a song as well, and he got paid pretty well, a little bit overpaid for some people. What moves do you not like from the Raptors?
Well, I don't like losing Amir Johnson just because I like his game, and he's a fan favorite in Toronto. And I'm not sure if Patrick Patterson is a better – I know Patrick Patterson is more of a stretch 4 than Amir Johnson was, but there's a reason Amir Johnson was starting last season and Patrick Patterson wasn't. So I think that's a downgrade in that department. But there's rumors that Tristan Thompson is coming to Toronto next season if he signs just a qualifying offer with Cleveland this offseason. So that'll be interesting to see. I know we're recording this a little bit earlier than when it'll be released, so the Thompson situation might be resolved by then. But that's an interesting little tidbit there where Tristan Thompson might come home to Canada.
Yeah, definitely the Raptors are definitely thinking about that. Maybe they're okay letting a go of Amir Johnson. They kind of knew that he wasn't going to be able to take that next step to put him over the top, so they were okay letting him go. I mean, they didn't even offer Lou Williams anything, even try to keep him to stay. I thought he had a pretty good season with them, but I guess since they wanted to switch to more defensive-minded, it makes sense.
Right. I think bringing in Corey Joseph and Norman Powell kind of brings in that defensive mentality that Lou Williams and Grievous Vasquez didn't really have, even though those two that they lost were really good scorers and really big for this team last season.
Exactly. They completely switched it up. Like you said, they're offensive players, and they put them in for defensive players. I'm not huge on Luis Scola. I mean, I don't think it's a terrible signing, but I don't know if he has a lot to offer at this point in his career. He just can probably give him the offense.
He's balling out in the FIBA Americas, though. I will give him that. Got to give him props.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's balling out there. Hopefully, it doesn't impact him. He probably needs some rest. Do you know how old Luis Scola is now?
Luis Scola is old.
Yeah, right. Like
he's I'd say he's probably like 34, 35-ish.
Yeah, so he needs to stay fresh, but they probably won't ask him that much this season.
Yeah, I don't think he'll have a major role, but for spot minutes offensively, you can do a lot worse than Luis Scola.
Offensively, I don't mind him. I just worry about his defense, especially with the team trying to switch over to more defensive-minded.
Yeah, well, Valanciunas needs to pick up that slack when Scola's in the game. He needs to be a really good rim protector because Scola's man's probably beating him off the dribble.
Exactly. Valanciunas has the size, so hopefully he can step up in that role. Who do you think's the X factor for the Raptors this season?
I think I think it's got to be Mr. Valanciunas in the middle, the big center. He has moves in the low post. He has the ability to play defense and block shots. It's there sometimes, and then sometimes it's just like it disappears. And so consistency with him will be huge because he definitely does have elite big man potential. He's very fundamentally sound. It's just his consistency sometimes wavers.
I would agree with that point. He needs to be more consistent. He's shown potential. He's dominated games at points, both offensively, defensively, and rebounding. Like you said, he has that 7-foot body that really helps him out. But I'm going to say DeMar DeRozan. I want to see DeRozan take that next step to his game and become more consistent every game. He has a lot of potential. He has that nice mid-range game. He can finish in the paint. He just needs to put it together for 82 seasons. And I think he's in a contract year, so he could have a huge year.
Yeah, DeMar is definitely good. I think him and Kyle Lowry both need to be all-stars next season.
Agreed.
They need to at least. It doesn't matter if they actually make the all-star team, but they need to have an all-star sort of impact for this team.
Yeah, all-star type seasons just so this team can go forward. Especially DeMar Carroll is expected to help them out a little bit, so we'll be able to see if that really works out.
I think that DeMar Carroll addition is going to be great. Maybe not. Maybe he won't have the numbers that he did with Atlanta, but he'll have a cultural impact on this team, which I think you can't really put on a value on. Yeah, you can't put a value on it, right?
So that could be huge for them. Best case scenario for the Raptors.
They were first in the Atlantic last year. Did anyone come along to take that spot?
No, I think they're going to end up with first in the Atlantic as well.
Yeah, so I think they'll do that again. Their best case scenario, I think they have to win a playoff series this year. The East did get better. I think Toronto did get better too, and I think the Kyle Lowry being in better shape will definitely help them out. I expect big things from this team, so I'll say top 4 is probably their best case in the East.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Best case scenario would be playing a home game in Toronto to start. Having a home series in Toronto just because it allows them to get that 7th game back home, and that could really be the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah, it didn't help them out 2 years ago against Brooklyn when they lost at home, but I always hope for more home playoff games for Toronto. I'm like, man, even if they don't win, that's cool, but I want to see at least 4 games and see the crowd because I love watching Toronto in the playoffs. Yeah. Even though ESPN puts them on like ESPN2 and like NBA TV and never gives them prime time, I don't care. I like watching Toronto.
Hopefully this year they can change it, but worst case scenario for the Raptors.
Worst case, Terrence Ross isn't the 6th man that Lou Williams was, or isn't even close. Valanciunas isn't worth the money. It doesn't really show improvement and getting better with his consistency. And this team was really good offensively last season, but they take a huge step back with their new defensive focus, and it really messes with them. I think that would be the worst case. And then I think this team's floor is definitely the playoffs. And so I think they'll make the playoffs regardless, but I think losing in another sweep would be the ultimate worst case scenario.
Yeah, I would say worst case scenario would probably be falling down in the seeding and like you said, getting swept in the playoffs, and they're just not able to find that balance between an offensive and defensive team.
We know Masai Ujiri, their GM, isn't afraid to shake things up.
Yeah, he makes some good trades.
Here's one thing I don't quite get about NBA general manager / coaching expectations, that Masai Ujiri, he's done a good job in terms of making good deals, good picks, all that kind of stuff, but it hasn't really translated to success on the court. But you definitely see the team improving while a coach is judged based on wins, not improvement. So I do think he's a really good general manager, but he hasn't had the success that
on the floor.
Yeah, he doesn't have like the success on the court to indicate that he's like a really, really good GM. And that's where people rank him. He'd be probably a top 10 top 5, top 10 GM in people's rankings.
That's a very good point. I honestly never thought about it like that, but that's very true. He has always won his trades, but it necessarily hasn't worked out in the core. I mean, the Raptors haven't got past the first round, so I think that says something.
And he's quick to pull that trigger too. Like if this team isn't really doing well midway through the season, you could see a lot of these big name players gone.
Especially if they think that there's a possibility they can't re-sign them. I think this upcoming offseason, DeRozan's a free agent, so that'll be interesting to see how that all works out. I think they probably really want to keep him, but he can definitely attract a few teams on the market for sure.
The one thing that I've heard about playing in Toronto is that you pay taxes to you pay Canadian taxes and U.S. taxes.
That's rough.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate, but I believe I've heard that somewhere from a reputable source. And that, like, maybe that's why they just can't get any free agents. Like, no one who wants to pay that, who wants to deal with having their passport updated and all that stuff constantly. So I don't know.
That's why they're really hoping for these Canadian natives to come back, like Tristan Thompson and Andrew Wiggins. I know a lot of people will want him to come back so bad in Toronto. I mean, obviously we don't know if that's going to happen, but it doesn't hurt.
Wiggins better enter that dunk contest, especially now that it's in Toronto in 2016. He better be in there to face his bounce bro.
Yeah, that would be awesome, especially in Toronto. You know the crowd will go ridiculous for him.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Let's get into the truth. I know the Raptors probably hate Paul Pierce, but they can probably enjoy this emoji. The emoji we have today is a battery that's supercharged, just like the Drake song, because the Raptors are going to have to come into the season supercharged and play consistent all year long.
They to speak on that battery, they kind of ran out of steam at the end of last season, so they definitely need to make sure that their battery is fully charged when they get into the playoffs. They need to be charged up.
Charged up. Yep. There you go. All right. So are you going to watch the Raptors on League Pass this year?
Well, I'll kind of have to. They only have 2 nationally televised games, and I really enjoy watching Toronto. I think earlier last season, they had a game in Cleveland where they were winning, and you can hear "We the North" like their chants throughout the Quicken Loans Arena. It was insane. Their fan base travels well. Their fan base is exciting, which makes this team even more exciting. And I think with Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, Terrence Ross, DeMar Carroll, and Valanciunas on the floor, that could be a really exciting lineup. The fast break will be nice. The fundamental post game will be nice. So I'm definitely watching the Raptors for sure.
Yeah, it's honestly pretty crazy. They only have 2 nationally televised games. Like, they have talent on the roster. They have exciting players. So you think they'd get more hype.
Dude, it's a USA bias, man.
USA bias, yeah. I mean, that's what also helps the Toronto fan base. It's pretty much a whole country behind one team. So that fan base is going to work well. All right, Parth, would you rather watch the Toronto Raptors or Blind Spot, the new show on NBC?
Well, I know that they have their season premiere this fall. And I'm not quite sure I want to see the Blind Spot. It's about some girl that has like a bunch of tattoos and she doesn't remember any of them, and it's some weird stuff. I'd rather watch The Blacklist.
And she's like dropped off in the middle of New York City, right?
Yeah, it's some weird stuff. So yeah, I won't be tuning into that, but Raptors for sure I'm watching.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Toronto. I'm a Nets fan, obviously, but I'll still go with the Raptors over that show.
You can always catch Drake wearing some weird getup at Raptors games or with like a lint roll or something. So the entertainment value there is pretty high.
And then you got Drake Night where he DJs. So there's some entertaining stuff in Toronto. Thank you guys for listening. And a hint for our next team, they might be the longest team in the NBA.